The morning I drove to Arkansas, I had Cameron's watch in my cup holder, not for sentimental reasons. I'd found it in the junk drawer the night before while looking for scissors, and I hadn't known what to do with it, so I'd just carried it to the car with me the way you carry grief sometimes. Not because you want it, but because you haven't figured out where else to put it. The watch read 6:14 a.m. It had stopped there. The battery had died sometime in the 8 months since Cameron died, and I hadn't replaced it, and now it just sat in the cup holder ticking absolutely nowhere, which felt appropriate. I'd been driving since 4 in the morning, 12 hours from Memphis, through farmland, then pine forest, then something older and darker, cypress trees draped in Spanish moss that hung over the road like curtains someone had forgotten to close. The kind of landscape that has no interest in making you comfortable. The GPS had given up 20 minutes ago. I was navigating by a hand-drawn map the sheriff's deputy had faxed me, and I want you to understand something. No one faxes maps anymore. The fact that this deputy had faxed me a map told me everything I needed to know about where I was going. The call had come 2 nights earlier. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table doing what I'd spent most of the past 8 months doing. Absolutely nothing, dressed up as productivity. I had a cup of tea, a crossword puzzle, the kind of evening that looks peaceful from the outside and feels like drowning from the inside. The phone rang at 9:47 p.m. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Deputy Ray Callum with the Polk County Sheriff's Office in Arkansas. I remember thinking it was about the land. Cameron had mentioned it once, maybe twice in 44 years of marriage. Property his grandfather had left him, down in Arkansas, a few acres near some town called Cypress Hollow. Never go to Cypress Hollow. His last coherent words to me, his hand crushing mine, his green eyes open too wide, sweat on his forehead even though the hospital room was cold. I'd assumed it was the morphine. I'd assumed a lot of things about Cameron. We have a woman on your property, Deputy Callum said. She's in medical distress, dehydration, malnutrition, possible cardiac event. The paramedics are with her now. She's been asking for you by name. I'm sorry, I said. Did you say on my property? Yes, ma'am. Out on Route 9, the old Whitmore parcel. That property has been empty for 30 years. A pause. Careful. The kind of pause people use when they're deciding how much truth to dispense at once. Ma'am, he said, it hasn't. I should tell you who I am, because it matters. My name is Daisy Whitmore. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years teaching 8th grade English at Carver Middle School in Memphis, Tennessee. I am not a dramatic person. I do not catastrophize. I have buried a mother, a father, a sister, and a husband, and each time I got up the next morning and made coffee and kept going, because that's what you do, and I've never known any other way. Cameron Whitmore was my whole life. I say that without embarrassment, and without the rose-colored blur that grief sometimes throws over a marriage. He was stubborn and private, and he folded his newspapers into perfect thirds before he recycled them, and he had never once in 44 years left a dish in the sink. He was a civil engineer. He liked order. He liked control. I had always read those qualities as virtues. Our daughter, Claire, was born in September of 1991. Difficult labor, emergency circumstances. I had been unconscious for part of it. Cameron had been in the delivery room, as present and controlled as he was for everything. When I came to, he put her in my arms, and she had dark hair and gray eyes, and she was the most perfect thing I had ever seen. She is 43 years old now. She lives in Portland. She calls me every Sunday. She looks nothing like Cameron, and she looks nothing like me, but I never thought much about that because babies are their own creatures, and love doesn't require resemblance. I need you to hold on to that. I drove to Arkansas holding Cameron's stopped watch and a thermos of bad coffee and 31 years worth of trust that was about to be systematically dismantled. The final turn onto the property came around a long bend in a dirt road, past a rusted mailbox that still had Whitmore painted on it in letters I recognized as Cameron's careful block print. I slowed the car because I wasn't sure what I was looking at. A farmhouse. White clapboard, fresh paint, not newly done, but maintained, regularly attended to. Window boxes with winter bare stems in them, the ghosts of flowers. A garden along the south side, the beds turned and mulched, sleeping under the gray February sky. Lace curtains in the windows, a chicken wire fence around a vegetable patch. Firewood stacked with mathematical precision under a lean-to on the side of the house. Someone lived here. Someone had been living here. My brain kept trying to offer me exits. Wrong address, wrong property, some kind of tenant arrangement Cameron had set up and forgotten to mention. I am an English teacher. I have spent my entire career teaching children how stories work, how to identify theme and motive and the moment a narrator is being deceived. I should have seen it faster. I keep telling myself I should have seen it faster. On the porch, wrapped in a gray wool blanket, an oxygen tube running from a portable concentrator to her nose, sat an elderly woman, silver hair fine and soft around her face, blue eyes so pale they were almost colorless. She was thin in the way of someone who has been hungry for a long time and learned to normalize it. A paramedic crouched beside her, monitoring her blood pressure. Deputy Callum stood at the foot of the porch steps, his hat in his hands, watching me pull up with the expression of a man who deeply wished he were somewhere else. I got out of the car. The woman on the porch saw me. Her face did something I don't have adequate words for. It collapsed and reconstructed at the same time, like a building that's been demolished and rebuilt in the same motion. She had been waiting for this moment for a very long time, and now that it was here, the weight of the weight came off her all at once. Daisy, she whispered, you came. I stood at the foot of the steps. My hands were in my coat pockets. I could feel Cameron's watch in there. I'd transferred it at some point without thinking. I don't know you. you, I said. She smiled. It was the saddest smile I've ever seen on a human face, and I've seen grief in all its forms. This was something older than grief. This was the smile of someone who had made their peace with something unpeaceable. No, she said, but I know everything about you. Cameron told me you were the strongest woman he'd ever met. My stomach turned over. Who are you? My name is Lorraine Dufresne. She paused, gathered herself. The paramedic looked up at me, then back at his equipment. I've lived on this property for 32 years. Cameron kept me here. That word, kept. Not lived, not stayed. Kept, like a thing, like something in a box. I'm the woman who gave birth to your daughter, Claire. The porch railing was 3 feet away. I grabbed it. My legs had stopped working in any reliable sense. That's impossible, I said. I was there. I held her. Lorraine's pale eyes filled with tears. She didn't look away. She held my gaze with the steadiness of someone who has rehearsed this moment 10,000 times and has decided that the only way through it is directly. Your real baby died in the womb, Daisy. Cameron switched them. He gave you mine and buried yours without telling you. The cypress trees moved in the wind. The paramedic's equipment beeped. Deputy Callum had put his hat back on and was looking at the horizon with great purpose. You're lying, I said. Check the closet in the house, she said quietly. He documented everything. That's what Cameron did. He documented everything. Go look. The house was warm inside. A wood stove in the corner. Books on shelves. Real books. A lot of them. Organized by subject. A kitchen that smelled of old bread and something herbal. It was the house of a person, fully and completely. 32 years of habitation compressed into these rooms. I stood in the middle of it and understood, in the way you understand something that rewrites everything, that Cameron had been coming here, regularly, for 32 years. Every business trip, every fishing weekend, every conference, all the times he had kissed me goodbye and driven away in his careful, controlled, documented life. He had been driving here. The closet was where she said it would be. Behind winter coats in the small bedroom off the kitchen, I moved them aside and saw the metal box on the floor, padlocked, about the size of a shoebox. I found a hammer on the workbench in the lean-to. I broke the lock in 2 swings. I need to tell you what was inside slowly because I need you to understand what each item meant. First, a birth certificate. A girl, unnamed, born to Lorraine Marie Dufresne. Date, September 14th, 1991. 1 week before Claire's official birthday of September 22nd. Second, medical records from a Memphis hospital I recognized. They described my labor, my delivery. Dr. Paul Hester, OBGYN. I remembered Dr. Hester. Nice man. Died of a heart attack in 2003. The records described complications. They described fetal monitoring. And then, on the 3rd page, in clinical indifferent typeface, intrauterine fetal demise. Female, approximately 38 weeks gestation. My daughter, my first daughter, had died before she was born. I had not known. Cameron had not told me. He had put another woman's living child in my arms and let me believe she was mine. And I had spent 43 years loving her and watching her grow and being the mother of a child who was never, by blood, my child. Third, the notebooks, 32 of them. Spiral bound, the cheap kind from Walgreens, each one labeled with a year and Cameron's careful block print. I opened the first one. October 1992. Lorraine has settled. She asked today about her options. I explained to her that she has none. The arrangement is permanent. She'll understand in time. I turned pages. April 1993. Lorraine asked again when she could go. Changed the subject. Brought groceries and the new photographs of Claire. She cried and wouldn't look at them. I left them on the table. March 1997. Claire lost her first tooth. Lorraine asked to call her. I said absolutely not. Spent 30 minutes explaining why. She understood, I think. I skipped forward. June 2006. Claire's graduation. Lorraine asked to come. I said no. Showed her the photographs afterward. She held them for a long time without speaking. Then she put them down and went to bed. May 2008. Claire left for Portland. Lorraine tried to escape in my truck while I was at the hardware store. Found her 4 miles down Route 9 with a cardboard box of letters she'd written to Claire over 17 years. I brought her home. I burned the letters. She didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. I understand. I would have done the same. The last entry was dated 7 weeks before his stroke, November 14th. I am a monster. I have known this for a long time, but have chosen to format the knowledge so that it doesn't interrupt my daily functioning. What I have done to Lorraine is captivity. What I did to Daisy on that night in September of 1991 is the kind of theft that has no name. Our real daughter, Daisy's and mine, died, and I could not find a way to give Daisy that grief on top of the grief she was already in, coming out of surgery, disoriented, asking for her baby. So I made a decision in about 4 minutes that I have spent 32 years maintaining. Every moment of joy Daisy felt raising Claire was a moment she was being lied to. I don't know how to fix this. I have never known how to fix this, so I won't. I sat down on the bathroom floor. I sat there for 1 hour. I didn't cry. I don't know why. I think I was somewhere past crying, past the altitude where tears can form. I thought about 44 years. I thought about the reading chair by the window. I thought about the coffee mug still in the dish rack. I thought about every time Cameron had driven away and kissed me goodbye, and I had waved from the door and thought I am the luckiest woman alive to have this man. Props. Every one of them. Props in a play I hadn't auditioned for. Then I stood up. I washed my face. I walked out to the porch. How much did you know? I asked Lorraine. The paramedics had gone, satisfied she was stable enough to stay put for now. Deputy Callum was on the phone by his cruiser. It was just us. 2 old women on a porch in the February cold, connected by a man who had organized organized us both around his needs with the same methodical efficiency he applied to everything. I knew what he told me, she said, which wasn't much. I was 24. I was alone. I'd answered an ad for a housekeeping position and he met me in Memphis and she stopped. It was one time. I got pregnant. I didn't want to be. I was going to make arrangements. He offered me money, a lot of money. He said his wife couldn't carry a baby, that they'd been trying for years. He said he'd set me up somewhere comfortable, that I could have my baby and give it to them and never want for anything. But you didn't go home afterward. He moved me here and then he didn't let me leave. Her voice was flat, old, all the outrage long since processed into something quieter. First it was just until you're recovered, it's not safe to travel. Then it was just until I can arrange your documents, there was a problem with your ID. Then it was, if you leave, I'll make sure they know what you did and you'll never see her at all. And I was 25 years old and I didn't know what to do, and every month I made plans to escape, and every month he came with groceries and photographs of Claire, and I would look at her face and think, at least she's happy. At least she has a good life. If I blow this up, I blow her up too. I looked out at the tended garden, the firewood stacked in perfect rows. Did he love you? I asked. It was not the right question. I don't know why I asked it. Lorraine thought about it for a long time. He loved the order of it, she said finally. He loved having everything arranged. Me here, you there, Claire between you, everything in its place. I think he believed that made him a good man. I genuinely believe that. That's the part that was the hardest to make peace with. She paused. How did you not know? In 44 years? He was very good, I said, at making sure I never needed to look. I called the sheriff from the farmhouse kitchen. Deputy Callum had left me the number of Hope County Sheriff Brett Donahue, 16 years in law enforcement, former state police. He answered on the second ring. Everything is in the notebooks, I said. 32 of them, the baby switch, the doctor he paid, 32 years of holding a woman on my property without her consent. He signed every entry, dated them, initialed them. He documented his crimes the same way he documented everything else in his life, because control was more important to him than self-preservation. Sheriff Donahue was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Whitmore, this is a significant criminal matter. I know. The primary perpetrator is deceased. I know that too. I was looking at Cameron's last notebook entry on the kitchen table in front of me, his handwriting, neat and black and absolutely itself. I don't know how to fix this, so I won't. I'm not calling for justice against the dead sheriff. I'm calling because Lorraine Dufresne spent 32 years on this property without identification, without a car, without freedom, without her name. She needs medical attention, legal help, and someone to testify on her behalf to every institution that is about to require an explanation for her existence. And I need the record to show exactly what Cameron Whitmore did. Every piece of it. Yes, ma'am. Another pause. We're going to need those notebooks. I'll hold them for you personally, I said. Every single one. What followed was 4 months that I will not pretend to describe cleanly, because nothing about it was clean. Lorraine was admitted to Polk County Regional Medical Center for cardiac monitoring and nutritional rehabilitation. She had been living on what she could grow and what Cameron had brought her, and since his stroke 8 months prior, the groceries had stopped coming. She had been eating beans she'd canned herself and drinking from a well, and had lost 22 pounds before a neighbor on Route 9 had finally noticed the lights in the house at night and called it in. 22 pounds in 8 months because her captor had died. That detail kept arriving in my mind at unexpected moments, in the grocery store, in the shower, while trying to sleep. The image of this woman watching her garden in the fall, watching the road that Cameron used to come down, understanding slowly that he was not coming back, that she was finally catastrophically free, but that freedom, without documents or money or anyone who knew she existed, looked exactly like a different kind of trap. I hired an attorney. Her name was Sandra Meeks, 30 years in family and civil law, a woman who had the demeanor of someone who has seen human beings at their absolute worst and is completely unsurprised by you. She sat across from me at a conference table in her Little Rock office and read Cameron's last notebook entry twice without expression. Well, she said, he was helpful. He was meticulous. Same thing in this case. She looked up at me. Mrs. Whitmore, the criminal statute of limitations on some of these acts has expired, but the civil record is another matter. And as for establishing Ms. Dufresne's identity and legal status, she paused. That's going to require some filings that will become public record. I know, I said. Your daughter will see them. I know. I had called Claire 3 days after I drove to Arkansas. That call is mine and I won't put it here. Some things aren't for public consumption. What I will tell you is that she didn't stop calling me on Sundays. She cried. We both cried. She asked me questions I didn't have answers to. She asked me questions I did. She flew to Memphis the following month and we sat at the kitchen table for 6 hours. And by the end of it, we were not the same people we had been, but we were still mother and daughter. And I want that on the record too, whatever else is on the record. Claire is not my biological daughter. She never was. She is still the most important person in my life. That is not a contradiction. It is the only true thing I know. The Dr. Cameron had paid, a Dr. Marcus Webb, OB-GYN, who had been practicing in Memphis in 1991, was located in a retirement community in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was 81 years old and suffering from early-stage dementia, which limited the legal utility of his testimony, but didn't limit his capacity to confirm what Cameron's records already made undeniable. Sandra Meeks, working with a private investigator named Keith Braddock, a former Memphis PD detective with a reputation for documentary precision, traced the paper trail backward through 32 years and found it intact. Cameron had paid Dr. Webb in cash, but cash still leaves traces when you you know where to look. Property records, travel records, phone records from the early years. Every January for 32 years, Cameron had driven to Arkansas. Every January, and 6 more times a year besides. Braddock presented his findings in a 40-page report dated April 3rd, which Sandra Meeks filed as supporting documentation to Lorraine's identity petition. It included the payment records, the cross-reference travel documentation, and the original birth certificate matched against the hospital's archived records. The hospital in question, St. Bernard's Medical Center in Memphis, had been sold and rebuilt twice since 1991. But medical records have retention requirements, and their archives had been digitized in 2009. And what Sandra Meeks found in those archives was a discrepancy that had been filed and forgotten. 2 delivery room entries for the night of September 14th to September 22nd, 1991, one of which had been amended 3 days after the fact. The amendment authorized by a Dr. Marcus Webb. The amended record described a live birth. The original record did not. Braddock, in his characteristic dry way, noted in his report that amended medical records are not unusual in themselves, but that the amendment in this case had eliminated all reference to the prior fetal demise entry, not corrected it. Consistent, he wrote, with an effort to remove evidence of a prior event rather than correct a clerical error. Sandra Meeks emailed me a copy of the report at 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday with the subject line, Exhibit D. I read it at the kitchen table with Cameron's watch in my hand, and when I finished, I set the watch down and looked at it for a long time. He had stopped that watch. He had stopped so many things. Lorraine Dufresne was granted a reconstructed identity by the Arkansas court system on May 17th. She received a birth certificate, a social security number, and the legal documentation required for a driver's license. She was 66 years old and had not had a driver's license since 1988. She told me she intended to drive somewhere with no particular destination, just to do it, just to go. I told her that sounded exactly right. The civil matter was resolved without a trial. Cameron's estate, which included the Arkansas property, a life insurance policy, and the savings from 44 years of a civil engineer's salary, was subject to a settlement negotiated between Sandra Meeks and the estate's executor. I will not discuss the specific figures, because those are Lorraine's business, and not mine. I will tell you that she will never have to worry about money again, and that this feels like the least that could be done and is still nowhere near enough. And I carry both of those facts simultaneously every day. The sheriff's office in Polk County submitted a formal report to the Tennessee State Attorney General's office documenting the circumstances of the baby switch for the purposes of the public record, even in the absence of a living defendant. Assistant Attorney General Patricia Holloway, 22 years in the office, issued a statement confirming that the documented evidence was consistent with the crimes of unlawful confinement, fraud, and identity misrepresentation, and that had the perpetrator been living, the state would have pursued charges. Had the perpetrator been living. I keep coming back to that phrase. The legal system, in all its precision, had done what it could, which was to name the thing and close the file. Cameron was dead. The file was closed. Justice, in the formal sense, was not possible. But I want to say something about that because I've thought about it for a long time. Cameron documented everything. It was the most defining trait of his character. This need to record, to log, to note. He kept receipts from 1987. He kept a daily journal for 50 years. He kept records of every project he'd ever managed, every estimate, every subcontractor invoice. And he kept 32 notebooks describing, in his own handwriting, in his own initialed, dated, careful block print, exactly what he had done to 2 women and 1 child over the course of 3.5 decades. He didn't do it to confess. He did it because he could not stop himself from documenting. The need to control the record was stronger, in the end, than the need to protect the secret. He thought those notebooks were his. He thought they existed in the same sealed world as everything else he managed. He did not consider that someone else might someday hold them. He was a meticulous man. It was his greatest strength, and it was, ultimately, the instrument of his complete undoing. He documented his crimes the same way he documented everything else, methodically, completely, without ever imagining that the ledger might one day be read by someone other than himself. He gave the world everything it needed to understand exactly who he was. I think about that. I think about control as a kind of arrogance, the belief that your management of a situation is so total that you can afford to write things down. He was so certain he would always be there to control what people saw that he never considered disappearing, and then he disappeared, and left all his notebooks behind. There's a thing I've been asked when I've told pieces of this story to the people I trust enough to tell it to. I've been asked whether I'm angry at Cameron, whether I hate him, whether the 44 years feel like a lie. Here's what I tell them. Yes, and no. The anger is real, and it is large, and it arrives without warning at 3 in the morning when I think about Lorraine sitting in that house watching the road. It arrives when I think about my daughter, my real daughter, my biological daughter, the one who died, who was buried somewhere by a man in a hurry, in an unmarked place, and who I have spent the last 6 months trying to find through whatever records might exist. Her name, when we found it, was in the amended hospital records original file. Female, Whitmore, unnamed, deceased. She had no name because Cameron had not given her one. She had no grave marker because he had made arrangements I still don't fully understand. She would have been 43 years old. I think about who she might have been, but the 44 years, the life I lived with Cameron, the person I was inside that life. Here is the thing I've landed landed on, which is not comfortable but is true. The love was real. Mine was. I did not love a fiction. I loved what I experienced, what I knew, what I held. Cameron managed what I was allowed to know, and that is monstrous. And he was a monster in this without qualification. But the years I lived, the woman I became, the things I learned, the ways I was strong, those belong to me. He cannot have them back. They happened. I was there. Claire is mine. She always will be. Not by blood, but by every morning and every argument and every Sunday phone call and every single moment I chose to show up for her. Nobody gets to take that, not even the truth. Lorraine Dufresne bought a used Ford Ranger in August. She drove it to Memphis and knocked on my door on a Sunday afternoon in October, 11 months after I'd first driven down that dirt road in Arkansas. I made tea. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd read Exhibit D, where I'd talked to Claire for 6 hours, where I'd looked at Cameron's stopwatch. We talked for 3 hours. About Claire, about what she remembered of those years, about the letters she'd written and that Cameron had burned, about what she wanted the rest of her life to look like. I want to see the ocean, she said. Which one? She thought about it. The one that's farthest from here. I told her I thought that was an excellent goal. Before she left, she stood at my door and turned back, and she looked at me with those pale, steady eyes, and she said, "I don't blame you, Daisy. I need you to know that. You were as much a prisoner of him as I was. You just couldn't see the walls." I held the door and thought about that for a long time after she drove away. She was right. The difference between us wasn't freedom. It was visibility. I had been held in a life built of deliberate omissions, every wall painted to look like a window. She had been held on a property at the end of a dirt road. We had both been in Cameron's control. The difference was that she always knew it. I found a jeweler in Memphis who agreed to melt down Cameron's watch. I had him make it into something small. A flat piece of silver, roughly the size of a quarter, stamped with no name and no date and no inscription. Just a circle of metal that used to be something that told time. It sits in a dish on the kitchen windowsill now, next to a plant, in the morning light. I stopped in front of it last week on my way to get coffee, and I picked it up and held it, the way you hold a stone. He kept better records than he kept secrets. In the end, that's all it took.